Well, here we are, Module 12. So we're going to talk about pivot tables this week. The first thing to remember is whenever you open a file or set up a table for using pivot tables, it's very, very important. Every column of data must have a title or a header component to it. Otherwise, the pivot table functionality will error out. So if you have an error as you try to create a pivot table, very likely your table does not have proper headers. So the first thing is to download the EX12.1 start file, and you want to save that as an NA, North America sales. And then we'll get into the modular exercise starting on page 276. So once you've saved this as EX12 NA sales, okay, I'll zoom this in a little bit more. Let's go to the Insert tab on your ribbon, and we want to go to Recommended Pivot Tables in this step. And on the left-hand side, you'll see that there's a number of recommended layouts. And so you can scroll down and see the different formats. Okay. In our case, we want to go to the very bottom corner. There's a button that says Blank Pivot Table. So let's click on that. And it gives you all the pivot table fields in a dialog box on your screen. Okay, so let's first of all, on the branch field checkbox, let's turn that on. Okay, let's click the product ID tick box, and then we want to click the sum of the product ID list arrows, and we want to move that to a column. Okay, then go up to the quarter. Let's click and hold the left mouse button. Let's drag it down below the branch field in rows. Okay, and then let's turn on the sales. So it's automatically defaulted that it should be the sum of sales as the values. As you can see in this table now, it's broken down the sales by the three major locations, otherwise known as branches, by the 4 quarters of the year, also split by the various product IDs in the various columns. Okay. Let's now click on A3 where it says sum of sales. And on the sum of sales, let's right click and you'll hit summarize values by. And then you'll notice that we can summarize the values by sum, count, average, maximum, etc. So let's click average. And you'll notice the data now changes to averages for the sales value by quarter, by branch, by product ID. Let's right click back on A3 again. Let's go to summarize values by, and let's click back on the sum. Next is under the design on your ribbon. You'll notice that there under the layout there's an option to go subtotals button. So let's click the subtotals button and click show all subtotals at top of group. Okay. Next is in the pivot table styles gallery, which is under your design menu. Click the more button. Okay, and in this case, we want to go pivot style light 16. So it'll be one of these. Looks like about here. Pivot style light icy blue 16. Let's go back to the Analyze tab. And where it says Field Headers, if you click on that, it removes the field headers, and then you can click on it back and it adds it in again, row versus column labels. So let's clean that up and we'll turn that off. Okay. Next is let's click on any value in the pivot table. You'll notice under the Analyze bar on your ribbon, there's a field settings option. So let's click field settings. And in our case, we want to click the number format. So down at the bottom here. And we want to change it to a currency. We want 2 decimal places, $sign. Okay, so let's click OK and OK. And that's one way to apply the format to all the cells within the pivot table. Let's rename this tab. So we will hit rename and we will call this pivot table. Let's save our work. So now we're over to page 280. So let's right click on cell H5. You'll get a little dropout menu. And we want to click on sort. We want to go to more sort options. It gives you the full dialog. In this case, we want largest to smallest. Okay. And we want top to bottom. And then let's click OK. Okay, so now you'll notice, or maybe you did not, LA was on top. Now it's Toronto's on the top and LA's on the bottom. Okay. Click any cell within the pivot table. Let's go up to the ribbon and click the Analyze bar. And in this case, we want to insert a slicer. So you'll notice under here, there's an insert slicer. And in this case, let's click the product ID and the branch ID. Click OK. And now we want to drag them to the right of the pivot table. Okay. So in our example, let's click the product ID 110 symbol. All of a sudden you'll notice that it filters out everything else but the 110. If you press and hold your control button and click the 510 branch, you'll notice now it adds the 110 and 510. Now let's click the New York button and now it only shows New York. Let's press and press control, click Toronto. Now we have New York and Toronto. Okay, so now there's just ways to dissect the various information. Up in here under product ID, you'll see this filter up here with the red X. That is your clear filter button. So let's clear the filter on the product ID. Let's clear the filter on the branch ID. And now you pulled everybody together. Okay. Let's once you have your branch ID selected, press the control button, click the product ID, and you'll notice you have both slicers selected. And back up to, let's right click on the product slicer button, you'll get the drop down menu. We want to, in this case, remove the slicers to just get it back to where we were. So let's save your work. So the last piece is in the pivot tables fields pane list on the far right here. I want to click the quarter field list arrow in the rows. So that's the quarter field. We want to move it to the report filter. So let's move that up to the report filter. Okay. And then let's go back to B1. You'll notice that right now it's highlighted to all. We want to click on 4 only. Click OK. Now we only have quarter 4 data. It's another way to filter information. Another option is you can hit the select multiple items and say you want a quarter 2 and quarter 4, you could do that, or any portion thereof. Okay, let's save our work. Okay, now we want to click on the North America sheet tab at the bottom. We want to go to the row 47 heading. Okay, so there's our row 47. Let's right click on that number 47. Let's click insert. And in this row 47, we want to enter the product number 450. We want to, tab in column B, experience. The next tab is New York. Then fourth quarter, and the value is 3015.05. Okay, so we've just entered this data in row 47. Let's go back to the pivot table tab. Verify that this is still quarter 4 only. So turn off all, put 4 on. And you can right click anywhere and hit refresh. And you'll notice now all of a sudden we have a new product for New York in the 4th quarter. So it's pulled that value of $3,015.05. So it just talks about the relative ability of pivot tables to update. Once you update the core content in the source in the table, you do a refresh on your pivot tables and it'll reflect any new information. Save our work. Alright, so you want to make sure you're on the pivot table tab. Okay, you want to make sure that the active cell is anywhere inside the pivot table, so just click inside the pivot table. So that way your fields pane list pops up on the right. Where it says category, let's click that category on. So we'll turn it on. And we want to drag the category field to drop in the branch. Drop it above the branch, sorry. So now we'll have category above the branch. And now, as another example, let's drag the category from the rows to the columns area. So category to the columns area. And let's drag the product ID from the columns to the rows. So again, just displays how simple it is to change how the pivot table is presented for you or for future readers. Okay. And we'll continue. We'll move the category field from the columns to the filters, category to the filters above the quarters. And we'll drag the product ID from the rows to the columns. Okay. Let's go back to the B1 list arrow, and we want to change that to be experience only. Click OK. And let's change the quarter to be all. So we'll pick on all. So let's go back to B1, click all, click OK. So you notice how dynamic these changes are. Let's go File, Print. Let's change that to a landscape orientation. I'm just going to hit fit the sheet on one page just in case. Let's go back to our file, let's save it, and we'll be going on to page 286. Alright, next is under, click the B1 list arrow. Okay, let's click experience again. Let's click OK. Let's go to the quarter and let's pick quarter 4 only. Okay. Let's click any cell within the pivot table. And in this case, now we want to do a pivot chart button in the tools group. So under the Analyze tab, there is an option to do a pivot chart. So you'll see pivot chart. In our case, let's do a clustered column chart, which is what it's defaulted to in my case. So click OK. And now you've got a chart that's linked to the pivot table based on the data in the North American worksheet. So now under the Pivot Chart Tools Design tab, so click on Design tab, we want to actually move the chart. So click on Move Chart. And we want to go to a new sheet, and we'll call that new sheet the Pivot Chart. Click OK. And now we have a new sheet called Pivot Chart, nicely formatted to fit one page, etc. Click where it says Sum of Sales. Oh, sorry, pause. All right, so over here on the Pivot Chart Fields dialog box, you'll see the option of Sum of Sales List. We're going to change it to be average, so click this drop down, Value Field Settings, and we want to click Average. So click OK, and you'll notice the details change accordingly in the chart. Let's go to the Pivot Tools Design tab. We want to add a chart element. So on the far left here, add chart element. And we want to go to chart title. And we want to go above chart. And in this case, we want to call it the average experience. I can't type. Experience sales. Press enter. Okay. And we want to drag the chart title border to center the title over the columns. So we'll just drag that over a little bit. So it's kind of centered over all three sets of columns. Let's go up to the Pivot Chart Tools Analyze tab. And you want to see the field buttons. And in this case, you can hide and unhide the various buttons that are driving the data to determine the chart. So in this case, we want to keep them hidden. And let's just do a file print preview to see how it looks. And it's nicely formatted to a full page. In our case, let's go and add our name to the footer. Let's go Insert, Header Footer. on the custom footer, let's add your name here. Okay, and let's save our work, and we'll go over to page 288. Okay, next steps, you want to click the pivot table tab in your worksheet. Okay, we want to go click the category filter arrow in B1. So let's change that to be all again and click OK. Let's right click on cell A4 and we want to hit summarize values by, and we want to go by sum. So we're putting it back to the sum. Let's go back to the North American sheet tab. Click on cell G1, so you might need to scroll back up. So G1, we want to go total Los Angeles, apologize, sales, and we'll click the enter key on the toolbar. Let's click the home tab on your ribbon, and we want to align that right. Okay, and let's make that bold, and then we'll adjust column G to display the new label, so you can auto fit that if you'd like. Let's go to G2, so below that. Let's go type equals, and then we'll click on the pivot table sheet tab. Okay, and in this case we want to click on IA because that's linked to the Los Angeles sales, which is Q4 only at this point. Click the check mark, and you'll see how it's linked to that pivot table accordingly. Let's format to be an accounting number format. So you should now have 22,658. However, we want this to be all quarters. So let's go back to our pivot table. Let's change our quarters to be all. And you'll see that it's dynamically updating what's represented in that cell. So let's, last thing is we'll go back to our footer. Go to footer, let's type your name in the footer center. Click out of that, let's go back to normal view. Let's save our puppy. And now this file is ready for you to submit for your modular exercise. Good luck.